Okay, I think we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and welcome to our Start With Self-Care event as part of our Welcome Plus programme. So I hope you're enjoying Welcome Plus so far, and thank you for coming along to our event today. So in this session, we're going to be talking a little bit about balancing your physical and mental well-being at university alongside your studies. And myself and Libby, who you can see in the photo here, we provide a bit of an overview of the wellbeing support available at Leeds, and we also share some of our personal advice and tips and tricks as well. So just to introduce myself, I'm Katie, and I'm a graduate intern in the Plus programme. And we've also got Libby as well here on the panel. I don't know if you want to say hi, Libby.
I'm Libby. I work for the Plus programme as our student involvement officer.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. So I think without further ado, we'll get started and we'll play our conversation. So feel free throughout to bob any questions that you have in our Q&A box at the bottom. You should see it along the bottom tab. Just pop them in there and we'll answer them throughout the session. As you can see on the screen, the chat and the mic camera functions have been turned off, but you can feel free to add your questions to that Q&A box throughout, and we'll answer them. So yeah, I hope you enjoy.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to Start With Self-Care. So today I'm here with Katie and we'll introduce ourselves, but today we're going to be talking a little bit about starting with self-care when you immediately come to Leeds, because I think a lot of the time it's something that you think about later down the line, and we just want to kind of encourage thinking about your self-care and your well-being from the very beginning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So my name is Libby. I work for the Plus programme currently as a student involvement officer. So I work a lot with our students on student voice projects and things like that. But prior to this, I did work for the wellbeing service at the University of Leeds. So we can talk a little bit about kind of my experience there. But I've also been in touch with a friend of mine who still works there. So she's given us some insight as well. I'll pass over to Katie.
Thanks, Libby. Hi everyone, my name's Katie and I currently work as a graduate intern in the Plus programme, and I just graduated recently last December from studying English at Leeds, so hopefully
And so we asked them all what they would have wanted to know about their university journey, about well-being and looking after themselves, and accumulate those questions, I guess. And then think about what we think, but also, like I mentioned, we've got some info from the Student Counselling and Wellbeing Service as well, so we can share that with everyone too.
sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
So the first question that we got through was mainly about how you actually access the Student Counselling and Wellbeing Service. So I got in touch with my friend Ruth, who I used to work with, who's currently a practicing wellbeing practitioner within that service. And she told us a little bit about how you can access the service.
Ruth has said that you can complete a self-registration for counselling, wellbeing or mental health support through the Student Wellbeing Hub website, and we will contact you when you're able to book an initial appointment. She's also said that appointments are available both in person and remotely, and you can book a same-day drop-in appointment to further discuss support available and for wellbeing advice, signposting and guidance. So I think that's really helpful as a kind of starter, really, just to kind of know that the student counselling and wellbeing service is there, it is available to you, and if you feel like you need support from them, there is a self-registration form that you can complete, which is sort of all linked, and you can find all of the links in our SharePoint site, and we can sort of help with that in the Plus programme, but they're all accessible online as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing to mention as well, and I'm sure kind of Ruth would agree with me around this, but when I worked there, kind of one of the most common misconceptions, I think, is that you have to kind of wait until things get really bad to contact the student counselling and wellbeing service, or you kind of have to, you feel like you have to reach a certain threshold to get in touch with them. And so we really want to highlight the drop-in service, which is a same-day drop-in service, and that's something where you can go and you can speak to a wellbeing practitioner for 30 minutes and just have a conversation about what it is that you're wanting to find out more about. They can do some signposting, they can talk to you about all of the options that are available here at Leeds in terms of wellbeing support, and they can also talk to you about support that's external as well, so different services in Leeds that you can access. Something that we're creating at the moment is a map of all the different services in Leeds, which you can find on our SharePoint site. So that's something that kind of they can talk to you about in the drop-in provision as well. So if you are interested and you do want to find out a little bit more, then, you know, kind of don't wait until things get, you know, bad or things get to a certain threshold. Just kind of speak to them and book in.
Definitely. I think that's such a good point as well, that, like, you know, the drop-in is there and you've got nothing to lose from going along, really. So if it is something that you feel like you could benefit from, then it's definitely worth going to. That's what they're there for, really, to help. So
fab. So the next question then that came in from students was around what we've kind of just touched upon there, which is what services in Leeds would you recommend for managing your mental health and well-being? So Ruth responded to this and she said, we would firstly recommend registering with a GP here in Leeds. So GPs are able to support you with your mental health as well as physical health concerns. They can discuss treatment options with you and can also refer you to other support. You can also consider self-referring to the Leeds Mental Wellbeing Service, who offer CBT groups and courses for difficulties such as anxiety, stress, low mood and depression. So I think that's a really good point, just to kind of touch on that when you get to Leeds, try and kind of register with a GP as soon as you can, because I think they can be really helpful for your overall health, any concerns that you might have there, but also if you do want to explore different services in terms of your mental health and well-being, then your GP is a really good kind of first port of call. And what Ruth mentioned there, Leeds Mental Wellbeing Service is the local mental health service in Leeds where you can self-refer, but you just need to be registered with Leeds GP in order to do that. Whilst there is a waiting list for some of the options for treatment, there is also some options if you don't want to wait and kind of want to access that support immediately. Then there are some group options, workshops, things like that. So it's definitely worth exploring.
Definitely, yeah. There's so much available to you. That sort of leads us on quite nicely to the third question that we that students had asked and that we sort of asked Ruth, which was around other resources, and are there any other resources that she can recommend to help me look after myself, was what one student asked. So Ruth said that the Student Counselling and Wellbeing Service, part of the university website, has a lot of resources, links and self-help materials for you to access. Details of any webinars and groups running through Student Counselling and Wellbeing and how to sign up to these are also listed on there. Together All is an online resource offering peer support, resources and to join in with conversations about mental health and wellbeing. The Mindwell website is a directory of information of mental health and wellbeing support available within Leeds, and also has useful self-help techniques and strategies as well. So yeah, I think that's another really good thing to mention. I know Libby's just mentioned that there about the webinars and stuff that are running as well, and that was something else I found really, really helpful whilst I was a student, was going along to the different things that student council and wellbeing kind of offer that aren't necessarily one-to-one, but the webinars and stuff, they're so useful, and you can kind of find out loads of really good kind of techniques for looking after yourself, and kind of about specific topics as well. So if there's something specific that you're struggling with, there's likely that they might run a specific webinar on that. So that's worth kind of looking into as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that Ruth's mentioned there is the Mindwell website, which is incredible. I used to use that a lot when I worked for the Wellbeing Service, and I use it for myself as well. It's got incredible kind of free resources that you can download. So there's things like self-care planners, there's kind of all sorts of things that you can access on the Mindwell website completely for free. So it's definitely worth having a little look at that, even if it is just about kind of starting off by planning out some things that you are going to do for self-care. That it's a great place to go and get those resources and download them. So I definitely recommend checking out the Mindwell website.
Definitely. I think it's really nice to be able to just explore what's out there as well, in quite a informal way, alongside kind of, if you do want to reach out and sort of get some support from someone one-to-one as well. I think that's amazing and definitely needed in a lot of cases. But I think there's also so much to gain from just kind of researching what's out there and online, and there's so many resources that I've found quite empowering to kind of utilize myself, and kind of just sort of have a look at, really, and you might get something from it, you might not, but there is so much there.
100%. I literally couldn't agree with that more. And I think it's difficult because I think there is still some stigma around doing things to look after your well-being and mental health, which is really difficult, and I completely get that. But I think what I try and do personally is think about my mental health and my well-being like I would my physical health. And I think there's no stigma around kind of going to the gym and eating healthy and doing things to look after your physical health. So I think a good thing, maybe a good tip, is to try and view it in that same way, and just kind of have a little look, explore what you want to find on the website, what's helpful for you. There's loads of different mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises, kind of ways to use exercise for your well-being, all sorts of things on there. So I think viewing it in that way is helpful, because it kind of destigmatizes it and allows you to kind of explore it in a really proactive way, rather than a reactive way when things are feeling more difficult.
Definitely. I feel like it's always a thing of the advice that's going for a walk, getting yourself out there. And it's I don't want to go for a walk. It's not gonna sort everything out. But I feel like there is so much to say for just going for a walk.
100%. Totally agree.
And sometimes you do just need to just get some fresh air and touch some grass. So I think it's
100%.
It's all of those kind of recommendations and tips and kind of self-care practices, alongside as well more one-to-one support if you feel like that's needed. Definitely seek that out. But I think also just be kind of trying to make it trying to make those lifestyle changes where possible, and just really implementing different things across different aspects of your life is, for me, where I've started to notice changes, and I think can be really, really, really positive. So no, I completely agree.
I totally agree as well. I think, and I think it's completely valid that maybe when you are really struggling and somebody says, "Oh, why don't you try go for a walk?" Totally, it's infuriating, isn't it? It's well, that's not going to help. And I think that's kind of my argument for encouraging people to start as early as possible. When you are feeling great and on top of the world, is the best time to start to look after your well-being, because then I guess it kind of maintains where you're at, it maintains that level of feeling more positive in relation to your well-being. And I think at that time, like you said, that is when a walk is going to be great. That is when a daily walk is going to be really, really helpful. Maybe not when things get more difficult, but at that time when you're kind of planning out your habits and things that you want to try, that's a great time to kind of implement those things that do feel more on the simpler side.
Definitely. And especially if you start in university and kind of, you might arrive and it's different for different people, but it can be really kind of exciting and maybe it's a little bit overwhelming, but there's a lot going on. I think if you can try and implement those kind of self-care practices from the start, you're setting yourself up for you know, you're setting yourself up really well for the rest of your studies, really. Yeah, I completely agree.
I think that's the thing as well, is I remember speaking to one of our engagement calls about kind of well-being and things that she would recommend and things like that. And me and her totally agreed that maybe one of the best tips in terms of being a new student is to create some kind of routine in terms of well-being and some habits and practices. Because I think when you start university, it's great, it's so exciting, it's kind of all this stuff, but it's also a totally different lifestyle a lot of the time to what you're used to. So it's understandable that the things that you have to do, like going to lectures, seminars, you know, studying, going to the library, those types of things, you kind of tend to keep up with. The things that are more optional, maybe, like looking after your well-being, going out for a walk, going to the gym, doing exercise, those types of things kind of sometimes can fall off the radar a little bit. So I think trying to be somewhat strict with yourself at the beginning is, like you said, it can set you up really well.
Definitely. I think a little bit of discipline is like needed around that time, just trying to make time for yourself and like routine. I'm such a creature of habit, so I feel like routine was just, I feel like you need it to some extent, don't you? So yeah, I completely agree. And sort of setting that up for yourself, it can be difficult when you've not kind of necessarily had to do that before, or like you say, it's a complete different lifestyle and different environment in a lot of ways. But you know, figuring out what works best for you and what things, you know, are really important to you and that make you feel good, and trying to put those in whatever way you can. And university is so fun in that sense, because it really is like up to you kind of in a lot of ways, what you know, how you do shape your days and what you do and get up to and stuff, and that's so what but if you can try and think, you know, put your kind of well-being kind of into that and think about what things are going to be really, really good for my, you know, well-being, and what self-care things can I include in my day-to-day, like, you know, I think it's going to set you up well for the rest of your time, and sort of beyond, really.
100%. I think as well, like, you're right, like when you start university, you've got that freedom, so it's like you can decide what you want to do. And I think sometimes, and I was definitely like this when I was at university, but I think you get super excited by that, don't you? And you think, oh well, I just want to do everything that's fun all the time, obviously. But I think after a while it's kind of trial and error a little bit, isn't it? And you can start to kind of see, okay, what's making me feel good, what's maybe not making me feel good. Even small things like you sleep, noticing kind of how that impacts you and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a recipe, isn't it? And just trying to kind of try out different things and getting that right, because it's your recipe and you've got complete freedom over that, which maybe you haven't had before. There's maybe been people telling you what to put in it and what to put with what and all that sort of stuff. So I think having that freedom is incredible, but it's hard. It's not always easy to kind of get the measurements right, you know. Sometimes you put way too much fun in and then it's just a bit off, isn't it? And I think it's just trial and error sometimes, but not being afraid to get it wrong as well. And if actually you have a bad day or a bad week or whatever, that's okay. It's all a learning curve, and it's just about kind of taking those things and learning from them and realising how that's impacted you, not beating yourself up for it, but then thinking, okay, well, where do we go from here? What was helpful, what wasn't, that kind of thing.
Definitely, I completely agree, and I love that. Like, I do see it as a recipe, like it really is. Like, and sometimes it's going to be a bit off, and you know, need to remake things. But that's completely fine, and it is a lot. There's so many different things that you're trying to balance, and I feel like you do learn as much about yourself and looking after yourself and all those things at uni as you do your course and whatever it is that you're studying. You know, it's such a like real time of growth, so you know, I think it's good to just try and lean into that as much as you can and take as much from it as you can. You're setting yourself up really. So, and like you say, there will be mistakes and down times, and you know, things might not go right at times, but that's, you know, it's all like you said, it's just a learning curve, isn't it? So
definitely, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it, like it's growth. And I think you know, you can in terms of when you do think about it like a recipe, just try and think that actually every day is like a new batch, you know. Every day you kind of remaking it, and you trying to decide what measurements you want on that day and stuff. So I think I love a little analogy. But I think it can be really helpful.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think that leads us quite nicely onto a couple of the questions that some of the students asked, which was around kind of like balancing all of the different things that you have on your plate at university. So, you know, your academics, social life, hobbies, whilst also looking after your health. And, you know, that might kind of be in relation to your eating and sleeping habits, which I know you've mentioned a little bit, and all those kind of things definitely come into it, I think. But also, you know, your workload and, you know, your kind of your commitments at university, as well as your social life and that kind of thing. And there is quite a few different things there. So I think in terms of that, like my initial first thought would kind of be related to what we've already spoke about start trying to like implement routine. And I think, you know, it's a little bit of discipline. Like I think it does go a long way. From my experience, I really noticed that once I kind of tried to set myself kind of a bit of a schedule, that I noticed my like well-being really improved. But also I feel like I was allowing more time for when I kind of said to myself, right, okay, I'm not going to kind of work late into the night. I'm going to kind of try and go to the library and kind of get some work done during the day, and then I'm going to kind of go and spend some time with friends in the evening and have that kind of, you know, compartmentalizing things and trying to put a bit of routine into my day. I really noticed that my well-being kind of improved as a result. And I think it can be tricky sometimes in the sort of, you know, you might be tempted to kind of go into the, you know, all-nighters, kind of trying to rush getting your work done the day before, and things can get so busy, and sometimes it happens where, you know, your work gets left to the last minute. But I think trying to, you know, avoid that if you can, and break things up into smaller tasks across time, and implementing routine to be able to allow you to get those things done is what I feel like really helped me when I was a student.
Yeah, that's such good advice. That sounds like a really good way of kind of managing it all, because I think one thing that we want to say is it's a lot, you know.
Yeah.
When you come to university, there's so many things that you're trying to navigate potentially for the first time, and there's just lots of new stuff going on, isn't there, that you're trying to manage. And I think my kind of main tip, I think my main piece of advice would be to write it down, because I think a lot of the time, and I'm so guilty of this, but I think we think, oh, it'll be all right, I'll get through it, you know, I'll do it what feels right for me on the day. And I think a lot of the time then you end up relying on your motivation to do things rather than actually having an intention behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that can get us into trouble sometimes, because I think if we're all honest, like if we go off how we feel, a lot of the time we don't feel like doing hard stuff. We don't feel like doing things that maybe we should be doing. And I think my main piece of advice is just to write down what you do in that day, you know, kind of write it down, and then try to monitor how you feel at the end of the day. If you can, you know, it's not going to be something that you do every day, but I think the idea of monitoring it's not about having to stick to that. It's not about being super rigid and super strict with yourself, but it's about monitoring it and seeing, actually, on that day I didn't do anything, I stayed in bed all day and I didn't feel very good. And then you start to understand a little bit more about what your own wellbeing patterns are, and what's good for you, what's self-care for you, and what actually isn't. So I think, like that question says there's a lot of things to balance: academics, social life, hobbies, all while looking after our health as well. Like, there's lots of things to consider. Getting your sleep right, all that sort of stuff. There's lots of things to think about. Eating. So I think, like, actually just writing it down, you start to see certain patterns week on week. So if actually you have a day where you have done an all-nighter, for example, you have tried to stay up because you've had a deadline, which, yeah, fair enough, maybe sometimes that happens. Then you get to a point where it's kind of like, all right, well, actually, I didn't feel that great the week after. And then you can start to identify, well, why is that? And I guess it's not about beating yourself up and saying, I need to do this differently, I need to live my life differently. It's just about noticing that and thinking, actually, you know, that doesn't make me feel too good. It makes me feel, you know, a little bit you know, different in terms of my well-being. So maybe let's try and plan differently, and try and kind of just be intentional about your habits and what you're doing day to day.
Definitely, yeah, I completely agree. And I love that point about kind of like not beating yourself up when things don't go the way you want them to go, because I think as much as we could have all the intention in the world to like not leave things till the last minute, like ultimately it probably will happen at some point, and it might be where that's just not how you work, and you know, it might be where that doesn't happen for you. But I think for a lot of people it does happen at some point and can have effects in different ways on your well-being. But I think remembering, like you said, to just sort of take from it whatever it is that, you know, you take from it at the time. So, you know, if it's where you've stayed up all night to get a piece of work done and then you're not happy with it, or you feel like, you know, you're not getting kind of, you're not doing as well in your kind of work because of that, then there's so many people around that can help you kind of figure out a bit of an action plan for next time. So like, I think for me, I got into a bit of a cycle with my assessments where I just kind of didn't really know how to tackle them. And like, it was only when I'd kind of went and spoke to my academic personal tutor, he kind of helped me like break down and make a bit of a process for kind of like taking the feedback from one assessment and then kind of thinking, right, okay, I'm going to implement this into the next one. And then I'm going to try and break down the actual task into sort of smaller ones. And then I was able to kind of get them done over a period of time and not procrastinate and leave them to the last minute. And that had such an impact on my well-being. But, you know, there's always going to be times where things aren't going to go the way you want them to go. And you might kind of know in your head, this is how I want to do it and this is what I know works. But, you know, sometimes you still don't do that even though you know that's the right thing to do. So
yeah, definitely. I
think, you know, it happens.
Everyone on the planet is guilty of that, and I think it's totally normal. I think something that you mentioned there, though, is really, really common, and it's kind of, we get ourselves into this really vicious cycle, don't we, where we think, okay, things haven't gone to plan, and then you start to kind of berate yourself and think, oh, I should have done this differently, I should have started this earlier, I should have done X, Y, and Z, I shouldn't have gone out last night, and there's all those types of shoulds and must thoughts in your mind. And I think what that does is it makes you feel even worse. So then you kind of just fall into maybe patterns of avoidance then, because you think, oh, well, I'm not going to get it done how I wanted it to be. So let's just leave it. Let's put it off. Let's avoid it. And I think what you mentioned there is maybe instead of having those thoughts or those kind of saying to ourselves, oh, I should have done this differently, I should have done this, I should have done that, say to yourself, well, what do I need? You know, what do I need right now to make things a little bit better? You know, it hasn't gone exactly the way that I wanted it to maybe. But what can I do what do I need to try and make things a little bit better, a little bit more manageable? And it sounds like that's exactly what you did by kind of thinking about contacting your personal tutor and then kind of putting that into action. How did you find that experience? Did you think it was a good thing to do?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think it was, for me, it was only really when I kind of broke it down with somebody else that I was like, okay, I see where I'm going wrong here. And it is like a sort of cycle, and I think sometimes we're not even aware of the sort of loops we get ourselves in, and it's kind of like you're just on autopilot. And for me, I'd always leave assessments to the last minute, and I was like, why do I do this? But when I broke that down with somebody else, that was when I was like, right, okay, I think it is a procrastination thing because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I don't want to get it, I don't want it to all go wrong. So I'm kind of like leaving until the last minute to kind of like protect myself at the side, like, oh, it wasn't my best work because I did it the night before, and then if I don't do well on it, it's kind of, I have that sort of thing in mind. So it was only really when I broke that down and kind of I had a bit of an action plan of like, I'm going to do this at this point and give myself a little mini deadline, and then I'm going to do this afterwards. And I started to kind of sort of stop doing that, really, leaving things till the last minute. So I think two things I've took away from that really are definitely speak to somebody if there's any aspect of university life that you're struggling with in relation to your well-being, or otherwise, to be honest. I think a lot of things can have an impact on your well-being, a lot of these things. And then also I think another thing would be to kind of setting myself kind of mini like personal deadlines for things really helped. And kind of, it comes back to that thing of like routine and discipline and stuff. And I think what I'm kind of saying now is very much in relation to assessments and the academic side of things, but I think it goes for a lot of other aspects of university life as well, and just kind of just having that sort of like reflection and speaking that through with someone if you feel like you need to.
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes us back to what we were saying about like knowing yourself as well, and kind of maybe going through a little bit of trial and error and monitoring what works for you and what doesn't. Because I think, you know, like you figured out that actually having those mini deadlines was something that was really helpful for you in terms of procrastination. And I think that will work for some people and it won't for others. I think sometimes it's just about figuring out what works for you and giving yourself that grace to be able to do that, because I think, you know, like you said, we can be really perfectionist about things and kind of try and get things right straight away. But I think giving yourself that kind of time to figure it out is really important.
Definitely, yeah, I completely agree. And there'll be there's you know, like you said, there's so many different ways that you can kind of do these things that'll look different for every person, really. But it's just finding out what works, and usually that is sort of through trial and error that we kind of learn these things about ourselves. So, like we've said, if things don't go to plan or if things are difficult at times, that's completely okay. And I think the sort of the way I'd recommend thinking about it is and it's easy said than done at the time, but you know, this is helping me learn something that is going to get me to a better sort of position further down the line. So yeah, definitely.
I think what you said about reaching out for help is huge as well, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the time there's lots of people who've already done that trial and error. They've already, you know, done the things that haven't worked and done the things that have. And not to say that's going to be the same for you, because it might not, but I think maybe speaking to somebody else can just offer you that different perspective, can't it, around what might be helpful and what you can try to kind of improve things.
Definitely. What can I do more of to help my well-being at uni?
I guess that's quite similar to what we've been talking about, I guess, in terms of that it's different for everyone. Everyone's kind of the strategies and things that help them is going to be kind of completely different. But there is something that I think can be really, really helpful, and it's something called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing. Have you heard of it before?
I hadn't actually heard of it before you told me about it.
Yeah, I love it. Literally obsessed with it. I think it's really simple, but it's based on a lot of research that a lot of people have done around wellbeing and kind of finding out the really key themes for everyone as kind of a broad population. And they found kind of 5 key things that we can do in terms of helping our well-being. And so the first one is around being active. So trying to do things maybe every day, trying to do something that's good for you in terms of exercise, or whether that's literally just having a little walk around campus or taking the stairs if that's possible for you instead of not. Or there's things that you can literally do while you sat down studying or working that you can do in terms of being active. There's another one which is around trying something new, learning something new, which I think is massive when you're at university, because I think there's so many new things, it can almost feel a bit overfacing, a bit overwhelming, and I think that can put us off sometimes, and maybe we kind of retreat a little bit and go back to kind of our old habits because it feels comfortable and it feels kind of soothing, I guess. But I think trying new things and learning new things is something that's like proven, I guess, to be really good for our well-being. And I think when you're at Leeds, like you're in a space where you can find all these new things to try, and you can literally, like for example, when you're maybe thinking about societies, I know they have the Give It a Go sessions where you can go and try new things and, you know, just see how it feels and whether it is something that works for you. So that's another one that I think can be really, really helpful. I know that you did a couple of the Give It a Go kind of trial taster things, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I remember before I started uni, I made like a list of all the different sites I wanted. There was like, it was unrealistic. I had like so many on this list. But when I came to Leeds, I found out that you can do these Give It a Goes, which are essentially like, you don't need to sign up, you don't need to pay anything. You can just, it's usually around the start of the semester. You can just go along to a session and kind of get a bit of a feel for what the society might be like and what it might be like to be a member, and sort of, give it a go basically before you commit to anything, which I really enjoyed. I went to a few, and then a few of them I ended up kind of staying on with, and I did yoga society and feminist society, and I loved them. Like they were so much fun. And I think like sort of linking in with that the question about kind of finding like-minded people, I think that is a really good way of kind of like you mentioned, Libby, of like the sort of different ways to well-being. I think that they often kind of some of them like link in and kind of sort of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, in the sense that going and trying something new and joining a society and you know, maybe taking part in a Give It a Go, you're also kind of potentially putting yourself in a position where you're going to meet other people who have the same interests, which I think societies are a massive thing in that sense, and such a big part of sort of making those connections at uni. And not to say, you know, not to put sort of pressure on it or anything, you know, sometimes it might not be the case, and it's different for everybody, but I think just putting yourself in that situation where, you know, you've all kind of went along to that society for the same reason, and I think that's a really good starting point for meeting people, really, outside of your course and things like that. So yeah, definitely recommend that.
I mean, that's another kind of one of the 5 ways as well, is connecting with other people. And I think when you start university, you kind of thrust upon people, aren't you? You're kind of like in a situation where maybe you're in halls, or you're put with people that maybe you don't necessarily feel initially like you have that much in common with. And I mean, you might absolutely love and get on with the people that you're in halls with, but then you might not. And I think maybe trying societies and things like that is a really good way to connect with people that are like-minded, like you said, and kind of find people that you kind of really connect with on a deeper level, I guess. Did you find it like scary at first? Was it something that you found intimidating?
Definitely, yeah. I think it is a bit daunting, and it's always a bigger thing in your head than it is in reality. And it'd always be getting myself to whatever it was that I wanted to go to that was the hardest bit. And at times you go along with people that you've met, or you know, the people who you're living with, but there was times where I would go on my own to something if I didn't know anyone else who was interested, wanted to go, and it was such a kind of, it was a real pushing myself out of my comfort zone kind of thing. But once I did it, I was so glad that I did. And like Feminist Society was one that I ended up sort of joining on my own, really. But I made so many lovely friends from doing it, and I was really glad once I was there that I'd done it, because it was such a good experience. And I think, you know, that you've got nothing to lose, and you've got so much to gain. So it's one of them things that it's tricky, and it feels sort of tough when you do it, but everyone's so lovely, and there's so many people who are also in the same boat of kind of, you know, putting themselves out there and trying to meet new people, and, you know, just sort of trying to work things out, really, trying to sort of just work it all out and give things a go. So I think it is a case of just doing it, really. If you want to do it as hard as it feels, it's never as tough as what it feels like kind of in your head, I don't think. So yeah, definitely, I think that's a really important one. And there's loads of opportunities at the start of the year to kind of find out about what's on offer in that sense as well. There'll be freshers fairs, and you can sort of see all the different societies and ask questions and that kind of thing. So it's definitely worth looking into. Yeah.
The other thing that we've got on offer as well, obviously, is Plus Programme socials as well. So kind of feeling like the Plus Programme, I guess, can sometimes feel like a really lovely community. And I think coming along to one of the social events, or one of the kind of different things that we do as the Plus Programme, in terms of whether that is socialising or whether it is just finding out a little bit more about the Plus Programme through some of our flagship events, like the Welcome event and Steps to Success. I think like you naturally gravitate towards people that are like-minded and people that kind of you will get along with. So I think that's maybe a really good way of trying to meet new people when you first start, and trying to connect with other people. I will say that I think when you first start university, it's a lot, isn't it? You kind of either whether you go to Freshers' Fair or you're getting 7 million thousand emails. I think like it's a lot of information. So I'd say if you're struggling with that, and we are kind of still sticking to that idea of planning things out, just think of one thing, one thing that you want to do to try and meet new people and connect with others, and just try and do that week. Especially if you're struggling with any kind of apprehension about going or going by yourself or whatever it might be, just try and think of one thing that you want to do that you really think would be helpful, and try and do that, and just start small and achievable, I guess.
Definitely, completely agree.
Yeah, I think connecting with others is a really, really big one, and something that can be really incredible at university, but also something that can be daunting. But yeah, I think that can be a really important one. The other ones are, so the next one is taking notice, which I guess is something that we're all quite guilty of not doing as much as we maybe should or would have liked to do. Taking notice, I suppose, is just about actually noticing and being present with what's happening around you. And I think, obviously, hopefully, like, we're all a little bit more kind of aware of things like mindfulness and kind of breath work and that sort of thing. But this can literally be anything. It could literally just be about noticing the bunnies on campus, or writing down one thing that you're grateful for, or thinking about one thing that you've seen that day that you've not seen before on campus, or one thing that you've learned at university that you've not known before. It can literally be anything. You don't have to kind of do anything major or learn how to meditate or any of these things that kind of people tell you that you should be doing now. I think it can be really, really small, but it's just the idea that a lot of the time our mind is either running off into the future and thinking about what might happen tomorrow and what could go wrong, or it's quite stuck in the past and thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this differently, or blah, blah, blah. So I think taking notice for me is more just about anchoring yourself in what's actually going on at that time and kind of bringing yourself back to the present. And I think we can do that in so many different ways. So I think that's what I would kind of say with that.
Definitely, I completely agree, and I love that one because I mean, who doesn't love the campus? The campus
Exactly,
buddies, like sitting and staring at them, or the ducklings in the pond, like just having a minute to just take it all in. I think especially at the start, like I would really recommend just doing that, and it's enjoying it, because it will be it's such a fun experience, but also there is so much going on there. I think just taking that step back and just sort of taking it all in whatever way it feels right for you, and I think it's such an important thing. And there's so many different things on offer as well, to if you do kind of want to lean into that that sort of way to well-being a little bit more, if that's kind of feels a bit more up your street. I think exploring things like meditation and things like that, if that feels right to you. And I know the Student Counselling and Wellbeing Service offer quite a bit in that area, and there's kind of meditation drop-ins that you can go to online, and like workshops and stuff that they run around that kind of thing, and sort of mindfulness techniques and exploring that kind of thing. So definitely, have a look into that if you feel like that's something that you'd like to explore. Because I think for me, I really enjoyed doing those kind of things, and I feel like they again like had a really good kind of impact on me. And I think it can help with, it sort of links into that other question about like managing your workload and stuff, because I think there's so much to say for like just like making time for that kind of those kind of like practices, or those kind of sort of like self-care practices, and implementing them into your routine, because I think that does ultimately help you balance everything you've got going on when you make time for that. Because just taking notice of everything and taking that step back and taking a bit of a breather can sort of help you work kind of in a bit more of an efficient and healthier way, really, and have a really positive impact on other areas like your academics, like your kind of social life or your personal life. So again, I think it's another one that kind of links in quite well into a lot of areas.
I know the Edge, the staff at the Edge also do some yoga as well, which you can find on Engage through LUU. We'll put some links on about the things that we're speaking about as well, but there's lots and lots of things that you can explore. And I think one of the main perhaps barriers is time, and it's kind of saying, listen, I've got millions of assignments, I need to go to my part-time job, I've got XYZ to do, which completely valid. Student life is such a busy life, but I think just trying to find things that don't take up that much time but still give you a real benefit. Like, for example, like we were just saying, going to the duck pond and sitting there for 5 minutes and just noticing what's happening around you. It's not going to take you very long, and it's something that can have a massive difference in terms of just kind of regulating perhaps some of the worries that you're having about the future or thoughts that you're having about the past. It can kind of just really anchor you in that moment. And I think sometimes we maybe underestimate the power of these things and think, it's like we were saying, someone's told me to go for a walk and it's not what I need, and I totally hear that. But I think just try it. Just literally give it a go. And if it doesn't work, you've tried it for a week, do it every day. Don't make any difference, then fair enough. It's maybe not for you. But I think trying it is the best advice, really.
Definitely. I completely agree.
The last one then for 5 ways to wellbeing is a bit of a funny one, I think, when you first hear it, but it's giving to other people. And I think sometimes that's a bit of a tricky one, because you think, wow, I've got so much going on, I don't really have time. I'm a new student, I'm doing XYZ, like we just said, there's a lot of things going on. the idea of giving to other people can feel a bit overwhelming, but I think it can literally be anything. So it can literally be making your flatmate a cup of tea if, you know, kind of they've had a long day or whatever, or just kind of saying hi to someone in your kitchen or when you see them on campus, or, you know, kind of anything at all that you can think of, you know, anything in the library, like anything. Someone asks you for directions, giving them directions around campus. Or, I mean, obviously there's bigger things as well that you can get involved in, like the Plus programme do quite a lot of projects around kind of helping out, whether that's ambassador work or whether that's kind of different things, different projects to get in touch with to use your voice. I know you kind of have been involved in quite a lot of things as well, which might be helpful to mention, but I think it literally doesn't have to be that big. I think it can literally be something really, really small. And I think that's the key to all of these things, is just figuring out what you have time for, what you feel like you have, like, you know, kind of room for in your life, and just making sure that you're intentional about planning them out.
Definitely. I really like this one as well, because I think it's so nice when you sort of make time for that and like make that quite a conscious thing, because, you know, it's again, like we've said, it's kind of, you know, potentially putting yourself out there, and you might sort of make a friend through that, kind of like by speaking to someone when you stood outside your seminar room waiting to go in, or you know someone in your seminars sort of struggling with a certain aspect of your course, or a topic that you've been looking at, and kind of offering to help with it or something like that. You know, there's a lot to kind of gain from that kind of thing. And I guess you know, it's you know, all about kind of gaining from it, but I think it's a really nice sort of sentiment, and a nice thing to sort of think about, is like sort of giving it to other people. And I think it was sort of really it made me think when you mentioned about like the things that we offer in the Plus programme. And I know you mentioned I was involved with a couple of those things when I was a student, so I thought it might be worth kind of mentioning, like, you know, giving in a sort of more broad sense. Like there is the option to share your voice, to share your ideas and thoughts, and by doing that, you know, you're kind of improving things for future students potentially. And that was something I really enjoyed during my time at Leeds. Like we in the Plus programme, we offer sort of various opportunities to do this. You can get involved with our steering group, or you can kind of take part in listening rooms, which those things involve kind of sharing your experience in different ways. So the listening rooms, you can speak, have a kind of conversation where you're speaking with a friend, and it's essentially recorded, and we kind of take that away and kind of listen to that conversation, and you sort of use that, your feedback and experiences, to kind of improve different aspects of what we offer. And the same with the steering group, it's kind of more of a conversational thing between different members, but you can essentially share your experiences with different aspects of what we've offered in the Plus programme, and share your feedback. And I think getting involved with those kind of things it can be really rewarding, because not only are you getting to share your ideas and your feedback, but you know that it's going to improve things for future students, and you can kind of feedback on things that maybe have been difficult for you, and it's hopefully that make things a bit easier for people in the future. So I think that's worth bearing in mind with that one, because, you know, it's there's so many different things like that on offer at Leeds, so that might be a good way of kind of ticking that box for wellbeing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's literally, again, goes back to what we were saying earlier about figuring out what works for you as well, in terms of your time, in terms of kind of what you're interested in terms of maybe what you want to get involved in. I think but I think, you know, if you start university and you want to think about self-care and you want to think about well-being, but you don't know where to start, which sometimes I think is understandable. It's a big kind of well-being world out there, isn't it? And there's a lot to get your head around. But I think the 5 ways to well-being is super simple and accessible way of starting to look after yourself. And there's kind of, it breaks it down on the NHS website, and we'll link that as well. But it kind of talks through each one, and I think you can take that as guidance, but it's like just using those as kind of, it's a framework essentially, and it's about figuring out what those things are that work for you in terms of those different areas. So getting active, you know, kind of maybe go down to the edge, try out kind of the different things that they've got going on there. I know they do run some free things on Engage as well. Just get yourself on YouTube and have a look at some of the kind of at home workouts that you can maybe do with your flatmates in your halls, you know, whatever. I think it's just, again, it's about what we were saying about just exploring and seeing, trial and error a little bit, seeing what works and what doesn't.
Definitely, absolutely agree. It's also reminded me, I think when you're, I don't know whether they still do this, but when if you're in halls in your first year, if you're in University of Leeds halls, you automatically get like a free Edge membership. So that's a sort of really, I think, a really nice time to like you said, kind of see what's on offer in terms of like classes and things like that. But also, you know, there's kind of loads of different like things that you can explore. It's not just the gym. There's you know, loads of different sports things going on there. So that might be a nice way to kind of see what's out there and give something a go. And it's, you know, it's free, so it's worth having a little look into.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we're super like way more open about kind of sharing things around self-care now as well, which is amazing. I think like the more we can all talk about maybe what's worked for us as well. So maybe you meet someone who's also listened to this podcast or who's also kind of interested in well-being, and you can share things. You can think about maybe using the 5 ways to well-being as a framework and think, oh, like take notice, what have you tried, what's been helpful, you know, what classes have you done around getting active, kind of, you know, have you been on any good walks, and kind of just sharing things that work for us and you know, kind of have been helpful, I think is a really good way of kind of building up that toolbox of things that help us with our own well-being and just kind of meeting like-minded people as well.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So just having a look at the questions again that were sent in by students, and we want to answer this one as well because it asks, what should I do if I'm struggling with my well-being and it starts to affect my studies? So obviously we massively hope that that isn't something that students experience, but if it is something that you find yourself in that situation where you are struggling with your well-being and it is starting to impact your studies, my main piece of advice would be to speak to somebody. I think in that situation, it can feel like you're completely alone with that sometimes, and it can feel like it's getting worse. You know, maybe your studies are piling up, your kind of assignment deadlines are coming closer, and you know, things just start to get more stressful and therefore it impacts your well-being more so. And I think even though it can feel super, super scary, I think the best thing to do is just speak to somebody. I think like there's lots of different avenues for that. So for example, you can speak to somebody in the Plus programme. You can also speak to your academic personal tutor. You can speak to the student information point. You can speak to the student counselling and wellbeing service. There's lots and lots of different areas around university which you'll be able to find in the map, which talks you through kind of the different services and things like that. But I think my best piece of advice would be just to reach out and just speak to somebody about how you're feeling.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think sometimes it can be a little bit, you know, there's so many, it's an amazing thing, and it's also, it can also be potentially a bit of a, you know, overwhelming thing of how much there is at the university to you know, how many different support services there is, and it might be a little bit confusing trying to know where to go. But I think, you know, there's someone, you know, like rest assured there's someone who'll be able to help you with what it is that if there is anything that you're going through. And as much as it might be a bit confusing to understand this, we hope that the map will be able to help this make a little bit more sense. And you know, if you feel like, you know, speaking to any of those people in the first instance is a great starting point, and if they recommend that you speak to somebody else, then we can go through that process. But I think just speaking to anybody to begin with is a really good start. And I think in terms of your studies, your school's student support officer is a really useful contact, because they'll be able to give you advice surrounding the kind of process of accessing support in terms of extensions on your coursework if you feel like it is starting to affect your studies and you really do need some additional support. They can give you advice around that. And there's also a process called mitigating circumstances, which if you are having kind of an extended period of sort of personal difficulty, and you feel like it is affecting your studies over a period of time, that's something that you can apply for, and your school student support officer will be able to advise you on that. So yeah, just to say that I think it's, you know, it's not something that we often hear about or talk about, but for me, I think it's really useful to know that that exists, and to know that if things go wrong, we really hope they don't, but if things do go wrong and you need that extra help and it is affecting your studies, there is support there, and there's, you know, there's a whole process that you're able to go through. And I think when I started uni, I didn't realise that existed, and you know, it isn't necessarily something you hear about, but remembering, you know, that your school student support officer is there, your academic personal tutor is there, and you will often hear about these contacts in the first couple of weeks, and you'll have your school's kind of opening talks and introductory talks, and, you know, definitely go to them. Don't skip them, because you'll be told about these different contacts, and, you know, write their email down, because you might need to get in touch with them at some point, and, you know, they're definitely good people to sort of keep in contact with and really try and establish a relationship with. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice, definitely.
Yeah, I think you're so right, definitely. And I think even if you do reach out and that maybe that particular person you didn't necessarily gel with or anything like that, you know, that's completely understandable. We're all totally different people, but I'd say don't give up. Don't let that kind of make you feel like you can't reach out again. I think, you know, there's lots and lots of people who work at the university, so there's going to be somebody who can offer that support and try and help you get to kind of where you need to be. The other thing I'd say as well, this is more of a, I guess, a personal thought, but it's just that there is absolutely no shame in asking for help as well. I think that's another maybe misconception that, you know, is quite common, that actually there's a failing on your part if you need to ask for help. And I think I just couldn't disagree with anything more, really. I think there's so much strength in being aware of what's going on in your kind of own life and what's impacting you and how it's impacting you, and the fact that actually maybe speaking to somebody and exploring options for support, you know, would be a helpful thing at that time. I think there's so much strength in that. And I think if you're ever struggling with that, just think back to the analogy of thinking about, what would you do if this was your physical health? You know, if you were running on a treadmill and actually your knee was hurting and it kept hurting and it was hurting and it hurting and hurting, you wouldn't ignore it, you know, you wouldn't carry on. You'd kind of acknowledge it and see if there was something that you could do to try and minimise that pain or try and help yourself. So I think just try and view it that way. And I think try, you know, with all of your might to not view it as a weakness if you do need to reach out for help, or you do need to speak to somebody about how you're feeling.
I completely agree. I think that's an amazing note to end it on, to be honest. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. That was really lovely to chat with you, Libby. And I hope you all found it helpful. Good luck, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I really enjoyed having that conversation with Libby. So it was lovely to listen to it back. I've gone through a couple of different slides whilst that's been on. One with the mentee, which you can continue adding questions to after today, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the Welcome Plus period. I also popped on a slide with some different links to the different services that we spoke about during the conversation, which we'll make sure that you've got access to afterwards. And I'll add a couple of things to that as well that weren't included. And then I've just popped a slide on there just with some details about what's coming up next in Welcome Plus. So we've got our upcoming podcasts, and then I've also included some of the other events that are happening as well, and a link to our full programme. But that's everything from me. I really hope you found it helpful, and thank you all so much for coming.